Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Star Trek New Worlds. My name is Tony, and thank you for joining us today. Excited to say that summer is here, the sun is out, as you might be able to see by the lighter tone of my background as the light comes through, and looking forward to today's episode. What are we talking about today? We're talking about, bad rolls and bad luck for the Klingons. Oh my goodness gracious me. I will tell you more about that. Some more bridges and or fronts are opening up on the ISC Hydran War. Big money and high rollers. We're going to talk about the money situation and who's separating from the pack from the EP perspective. And of course, we're going to go over the Turn 61 reveal. But if you're brand new here and you have no idea what I'm talking about, and you're saying, Tony, what in the world is Star Trek New Worlds? Star Trek New Worlds is a turn-based strategy game that we play here with you online on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch over the airwaves using the rules of Federation and Empire and showing it to you all using the wonderful world of Vassal that you will see here in a moment using our maps. So exciting, delighting news today. I want to give a quick shout out to Lex Chaotica, our latest subscriber. Thank you very much. We are now at 230, which is nearly halfway there. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers. 500 is when they unlock the community tab for us on YouTube, and then we can share some more and exciting things with you as far as how we post things on YouTube. So as we kind of work our way towards that, we're looking to unlock that feature. So thank you, Lex Chaotica, for being number 230 on our list of subscribers. If you are interested in all things Star Trek and strategy-based gaming, then maybe subscribing would be fun for you and be able to join us here on our Saturday live streams and any and all of our tutorial videos as they come out. Speaking of being part of our community, taking a sip of a coffee here. If you also like things coffee, then you can just take a look down there and hit that link for coffee, either giving us, buying us a coffee today or offering some monthly support. You can also join us either through Patreon or through that coffee link on Discord, our community of Discord players, where we banter back and forth and poke fun at each other and, of course, share the narrative and the storyline around the roleplay that goes into this game. But let me, before I sort of dive into the players, let's talk about who's who in the zoo here. Eugene, first on the scene. Thank you very much, Eugene, for joining us. Almost time for the weekly update. Looking forward to the news. I like this particular note from Eugene. Hope to hear that the two E2 captains have been awarded for bravery. One went through the wormhole and the other one faced overwhelming odds to chase off the Carnavan. Well, thank you for bringing my attention to how much I need to note of the accomplishments of these various E2 captains, or E1 captains, I should say, those W-era ships taking on such monumental odds. So we'll talk about that. And of course, liberating resources, and we'll talk about the money and the big money players. But before I do that, let me just say hi to Bill, and then of course Jim, our GM Daniel. Paul is in the house. Looking forward to sharing the news of what is going on in the game right now. Okay, so speaking of all things game, let's just take a quick look at the map. You can see here we've got an interesting. We're going to start off. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, from the Juggernauts once again, freshen up the coffee. Thank you very much. That final donation, if you head over to our coffee link, I believe will put us at the monthly goal. Now, granted, it took us more than a month to get there, but the monthly goal of sort of accumulating these coffee donations has been reached. So celebrations are in order, and of course that goes towards keeping at least this guy highly caffeinated and stimulating for you today. So thank you very much to our Juggernaut friends for keeping the entertainment value here today. So thank you for that. All right. Now, normally I want to start off with what has now become, or is about to become, as our GM Daniel mentioned earlier today, the Four Powers War. Before, we used to be talking about the ISC versus the Hydrans and the tete-a-tete that was happening there, and then the sneaky inclusion of both the Carnavans and the Remans in the fight, potentially. Well, now we have basically gotten to the point where it is now not a one, not a two, but a Four Powers War, as all four of those players are within reach of each other and ready to exchange blows. My terrible sound effects. Okay, so why don't we start with the Carnavans and we'll work our way up as we talk about this. So before I get started with all our various factions, let's do the round the clock, and we'll start with EP. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let's talk about the money. There is a separation of sorts that's occurring on the economic scale, and let's go over it. So the Carnavan, although it says here 44, are actually at 43 because there is a Carnavan colony still in Federation space that has yet to join the Federation. So they're at 43. The Federation is at 39, speaking of Big Blue. The Gorn are at 39.5. The Hydrans, with some discovery of some new resources, is now over 40 at 40.5. The ISC, granted, they still have their minor planet with the 3.5 difference. So they're, although it says 40 on their list, they're really sort of 36.5. The Klingons are at 44, which is a point of frustration I will go over in the Klingon turn. The Lyrans are at 38.5. The Remans are at 38.5. The Romulans are at 37, and the Tholians are at a big 44. So first of all, let's just talk about the bottom of the barrel and start working our way up. So the Romulans right now are at the lowest economic level at 37. Again, I just want to point out that the difference between 37 and 44, 70p, in peacetime is not that big a deal. There is not a huge delta or difference in that economic power. However, when you go to war, that's when you really start to see the flex in what you can do with that extra EP. That being said, the cloaking technology folks in this game seem to be lagging behind, particularly interesting when we talk about the Remans. Now, the Romulans are at 37, but the Remans are right behind them at 38.5. At 38.5, they are the next on that totem pole. And considering they have still the biggest fleet, which we'll get into Fleetcap in a second. They have the biggest fleet still on the map or close to it. They are starting to suffer the consequences of their lack of attention to exploration. So interesting to note, this has happened a couple times in the game where you've seen factions that go to war and they suffer economically because of their concentration on their conflict. So question for the players and for you as the audience, do you think it's worthwhile going to war? Are the benefits sort of outweighing the cons in fighting these wars and what you're looking for? Do you, as the viewers, do you want to see more concentrated, sort of objective-driven wars and conflicts where players are seeking specific tangible results in exchange for their conflict instead of just, you know, slugfest grudge matches that go back and forth? Now, granted, we all love a good grudge match. I'm just wondering, with the lack of tangible goals and accomplishments in various campaigns, not only the ISC and Hydran one, what is your metric of success as the audience for any of these conflicts? What do you want to see? Put it in the comments and the chat just now. All right, so as we go back up, we've got the Remans at 38.5, and then, of course, the Lyrans tied at 38.5. Now, we know the Lyrans have sort of faced this constraint about their borders. I'll just hover up here to the Hydran map just so we can take a look. Whoop. So move that guy out of the way there. So you can see, of course, that the Lyrans are really confined by their neighbors. They have this very clear triangle, ironic since the logo for the Lyrans in Federation Empire is a triangle, but form and function here matching each other. They've got a very triangular and really closing off at the bottom there, sort of access to the rest of the map. What are the Lyrans going to do? Are they going to? It looks as though they're going to keep pushing forward with this exploration, and are they going to be able to get beyond the sort of agreed upon borders with, as you can see, the Federation and the Remans? How is that going to play out going forward? We shall see. As we look more at, we've got the Remans, we've got the Lyrans, and then next up on our list is the Gorn. Now, I love the Gorn story. It's like a story of redemption. We knew, and at the early stages of this game, that the Gorn were suffering. They were having problems with their exploration and even just getting ships out of the sort of out of space dock. Now what we can see is that even though they're territory is small. Their economy is not. They are at 39.5, and they are doing quite well. The key to their success or continued success will be their continued exploration and expansion, especially as they go towards the center. As you can see with all these different factions, and let me zoom out the map once again, the race is on for the center of the map. You can see there's a very clear sort of focal point towards the center, and how is that going to play out with our various factions? Who knows? Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see. But for the different factions to not be closed off and to give themselves opportunity to be able to continue to explore, for example, towards the center, in the Gorn's case, they really need to focus on that. All right, so the Gorn are at 39.5, and then after that, we start getting into the 40s. The ISC, like I said, they are listed here as 40, but they are really more 36.5. So really, I should say they're the bottom of the barrel. Again, just another example of how conflict and war has consequences. So the ISC have really dialed back their exploration and have been suffering some losses and now recent gains in their conflict with the Hydrans. So again, is it worth it to go to war? I don't know. We'll see. So the ISC and the Hydrans are at, according to this, 40, although, like I said, with the ISC, they're really more 36.5. But the Hydrans have they're continuing to explore and expand, discovering 2 resources this past turn, which is allowing them the opportunity to be able to continue to grow their economy. So they got the right strategy in play. The problem is, of course, they're still dealing with their conflict. And then we start sort of getting into what I'm referring to as the stratification of economies. As we go up to 40, everyone's really close. And then there's 3 factions that are really separating themselves from the pack. The first is the Carnavan, and we talked about them just a second ago. So the Carnavan down here, as I scroll down, the Carnavan are experiencing, I don't know, a healthy exploration expansion of their borders as they kind of move towards the center, as they continue to do. And you can see here, as I take away the ships ever so briefly, you can see that their discovery of new resources in this area is what's really driving their success. I'll move the map over just a little bit so you can see there's also, if I bring the ships back, you can see there's not a lot of exploration happening on their eastern side. It's really all their western side. But nonetheless, they are maintaining the exploration, which is driving their growth. Then you've got the Tholians, who are, from my perspective, frustratingly, still doing extremely well when it comes to their exploration and expansion. Bringing the ships back, you can see they've got continued exploration with their various kinds of large exploration ships. You've got this one here, and so on. And then you've got their minor exploration ships. I'll just move this map over here so you can see 1, 2, and 3. If we take those ships away, you can see that between the incorporation of all the planets that they're discovering, and then, of course, the odd resource, their economy continues to grow. And that's really sort of the story here, is that as these planets that they've conquered start coming online with their full economies of scale, once they're not devastated, that's when you're going to see the real delta appear between them and the rest of the players. So the Tholians are starting to eke up or catch up, and I think they're going to take over the lead when it comes to economies. And lastly, let's talk about the Klingons ever so quick when it comes to economies. You can see here, it's hard to see on this map, on this scale, based on the fact that the Klingon color palette is black and white and gray. But what we can see here is essentially a lot of resources on the fringe. So you can see there's a healthy amount of what we call the backyard resource farm here, where you've got a lot of sort of protected resources that are far away, relatively far away from contact with the enemy. But there's a continued exploration happening And as I bring the ships back, you can see what kind of exploration is going on. There's this swarm along the border with the Romulans and, of course, continued exploration all around. So we'll talk more about that in the Klingon turn. But all that to say that the Klingons are on their 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, seek out new life and civilizations, and to subjugate, dominate all those civilizations that they find. So we are in the midst of doing that, growing the economy, keeping our economic place. That being said, there's going to be some stuff to talk about in that regard. But I digress. Let's get back into the fun stuff, and let's start with the Carnavan. Let's go to Fleetcap. Before I do that, apologies. All right, so Fleetcap, we're going to go over the fleet count for the Carnavan. They are at 63 ships, so not a significant increase in the total number of ships for the Carnavan. However, and again, they are at 155, 281. 155 being that milestone of like the step, we'll call it, when it comes to the total offensive firepower of these fleets. So they're now 155, 281. The Federation with 41 ship equivalents, still just over 100. They're at 109, 179. The Gorn are at 36 ship equivalents. No change on their end. They're still hovering with 75 total attack and 149 total defense factors. The Hydrans continue to pump out ships. They're at 68 total. Granted, they've lost a few in recent conflict, but they're at 160, 272. So again, above that 150 tier when it comes to total attack factors. The ISC, wow, 81 ship equivalents. Now there's a couple of ships in this minor faction that's over in the Tholian space. However, if you take away the 7 ships that count for that, that's still, oh my goodness, 74 ships that they have, and they have well over 200 total attack factor. Their attack factor is creeping close to the total defense factor of the Hydran. So very interesting, that sort of relationship. The Klingons continue at a sort of a steady 54 with a 138-218 split. Nothing too drastic or changing there. Nothing has fundamentally changed with the Klingon fleet. The biggest thing is still the recovery of the war with the Romulans and repairing those ships. Funny or interesting to note that the repair of those ships isn't significantly, obviously, changing the number of ships in the fleet, but slowly over time, the attack factors are going up as those repaired ships come online. The Lyrans are at 54 ship equivalents against tied with the Klingons. Notice the difference, though. They have a 126-250, higher defense factor, lower attack factor, and that just speaks to the sort of the dynamic of their ships. The Remans, 86 ship equivalents. They are still the creme de la creme when it comes to total offensive firepower with 236 and 311. The only faction with over 300 defense factors. Unbelievable. The Romulans with 46 ship equivalents have a 124-200 split. Very interesting and important to note that their sort of military power is balanced with their neighbors, the Klingons being, again, 138, the Gorn being sub 100. So they're very well positioned. And of course, you can tell by when we get to their map, the amount of exploration that they are doing. And then lastly, but not least, the Tholians with their abysmal 65 attack factors, in the sense that they are the lowest in total offensive firepower, but 47 ship equivalents, and they are slowly building up. To be fair, the Tholians don't need any military because they're not being challenged by anybody. No one is poking or prodding them. No one is pushing their buttons. No one is forcing them to defend their space. Whereas Four Powers War and various other conflicts that have happened throughout the game are forcing that from other players. So very interesting to see. Would it be substantially different if a particular faction decided to push on the Tholians? What would that look like? How would that manifest at this stage in the game? Interesting to note the difference between Y, M, and GW. We're not at those stages yet, but at Y Tech, note where the Tholians are, how big their fleet is, their competency and capability from a military perspective, and note that now, because as we get into the M and GW eras later in the game, that's going to substantially change. All right. So, with the Fleetcap and the EP all done. Again, the question to you all, and let me come back to the chat as I will look at it. The question to you all is it worthwhile going to war? And when you do go to war, if you're a player, do you have specific strategic objectives when you do so? Do you define what done or success means for you when you go into these conflicts? Or are you just, looking to cause chaos and stir the pot? Both, either, all are valid reasons to sort of start a conflict in a war game. But for you as a player and for you as the audience, what do you want to see? Do you want to see players with stated strategic objectives working towards it, getting to the point where they are claiming success because they've reached those milestones? You let me know. Let's jump into the chat and see what's going on. All right. Oh, it looks like we might have a new member of our community. Genesis fan 72 starting a new F&E game next week. First time in 14 years getting the old band back together. Well, congratulations, Genesis fan. Thank you for joining us on the live stream today. I look forward to hearing about that game. You'll come back on and tell us about it and how exciting it is. Are you playing the traditional tabletop sort of the Cold War between the Klingons or the Coalition and the Alliance, so to speak? Or is it some sort of iteration like we're doing here with 4X? Are you playing tabletop or are you doing it virtually using something like Vassal? Let us know. It'd be really interesting to find out. Lord Lawless, overload photons. Genesis 72 and hi to Lex Chaotic. Chuck is in the house. Hello, Jim. Genesis and Lord. Bill, sometimes one needs to use aggressive diplomacy to achieve goals. Fair enough. The question is, what was the goal that you're trying to achieve? We'll have to discuss that more between our players as we go. Chuck, I just took over 2 planets. Boom, boom. We're going to have to jump in there and take a look at that. Bill, Daniel, you know what Speed 5 tech gets you? Strategic Move 10? No, it doesn't. It doesn't get you Strategic Move 10. Well, okay. George Duffy is in the house. Hello, all. Gee, looks like Klingons are drawing a line in the sand with the Romulans. Not so much, just more like exploring and trying to get rid of that fog of war, but we'll see. And then, of course, Bill saying hi. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a quick sip and celebrate. We are now at double digits once again for concurrent viewers. So thank you very much for everybody for joining us. If you haven't already, then please put your comments in the chat below or to the side, however you're viewing this. And then please hit that thumbs up button as I take a quick sip. All right, let's get to the Carnavans. The Carnies bringing their light and entertainment show to you at your local parking lot and mall. All right, Carnavans, here we go. So a couple things. That little guy, don't worry about that little guy. That guy again went through a wormhole over into Romulan space and is slowly working his way back to Carnavan space. As per our discussion with the Carnavans, the Klingons have no interest in interfering with that. In fact, we're trying to facilitate it. Of course, he's going sort of a straight line, beeline in that direction. However, I had posited an interesting option to the Carnavans in discussion. What if that YDD turned around and went straight for the center? The center of the map technically is, because we've got 57 hexes up and down, and when you look at the midline, it's the Charlie line, which is this line right here where I'm putting that little hex. So the center of the map is Charlie around 27, 28. So look at the distance. Oh, my head is in the way. Let me move my head so you can truly see and appreciate what I'm talking about. Look at the distance between this destroyer and the center of the map. Would it not be useful to have that destroyer just head straight to the center? And if there is a Juggernaut faction in the center of the map, which we think there is, or something there, then that destroyer, although it won't uncover the fog of war hex, if it comes across a base or a planet or some other military units, it will encounter them, and we will be able to all visually identify as a reference point. Aha, there are the Juggernauts. And so then we can all kind of coalesce and align behind that. Be interesting to see. So anyways, it was an idea that I poked or suggested to the Carnavan. What if he that little YDD went up that way? So something interesting to look at and think about. Interesting. So a couple of interesting notes here when it comes to the Carnavan turn. They've discovered a couple of resources. So there was a resource discovered here, and I believe this is a brand new Orion base. So this brand new Orion base has the first reserve fleet on it. So let's just take a quick look. Carnavan, first reserves. Boom. Again, it's an exploration fleet with a YFF and a large exploration freighter. And so they landed on this hex, discovered an Orion in their space. What are the Orions going to do? I wonder. In the past, the Carnavans have had a very zero tolerance policy when it comes to all things Orion. So it'll be very interesting to see how those Orions are used, not used, or eliminated as we go forward. So very interesting to see. Also, we can see with the Carnavan turn on this border right here, you will note that this previously, last turn, had an E1 in that hex, and now there is a YFF. After some discussion in our diplomacy channel with the Carnavan player, we agreed to turn over that resource back to the Carnavan. I will note a couple things. One, that resource used to be Klingon, and then in our conflict, it became it became Carnavan, and the ship that responded to it, in the sense of the ship that took that resource, was in response to a random fleet of 7 ships that just happened to be cruising around in the neutral zone. So, as Eugene mentioned, big Medal of Bravery honor here for the E1, the W-era frigate, the weakest possible ship you could think of, that challenged 7 warships from the Carnavan Navy and said, hey, guys, I think you're lost. Can I help you find your way back home? And help them get back to where they needed to be. So they went back home, and now they've taken back that resource. I think this is a great opportunity for the Carnavans to discuss, the Carnavans and the Klingons, that is, with our hard C or hard K sounding consonant alignment there, that we can, the Carnies and the Klingons can discuss how we can best work together to bring about peace in the galaxy and uniformity when it comes to what we're working on. So we'll see how that goes. But yes, there was a little bit of a discussion about that particular resource, and basically I acquiesced to the request to have it go back to being Carnavan. So that's how that goes. Basically, nothing too much else. The two big things from the Klingon perspective, anyway, is Wolfpack and Den Fleet. So let's just take a quick look so you can see those fleets, and then we're going to move up into Hydran space. So Wolfpack 1 is basically those 7 ships. Although right now it's looking like 5. So you've got a drone bombardment destroyer, 3 destroyers and a frigate, and then one of those frigates went over there to claim that resource, and the other frigate went over and sat on this YBS. So you've got essentially the same number of ships in the same area, they're just a little bit dispersed. So there you go. And then Den Fleet, of course. Den Fleet is the remnants of the big bad fleet that basically clobbered or intimidated the Klingons along this border. So currently it is a Dreadnought, a YCC, a YCA, a drone bombardment destroyer, a destroyer, and 2 frigates. So really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ships. Nothing too crazy. And so that's good. There's not a lot of tension on the border between the Carnavans and the Klingons, and that's good because that allows everybody, as we were talking about, to explore strange new worlds and discover those new resources, which then we can exploit and take advantage of. What else do we have? Little thing to note here: the new Romulan, or this minor planet that the Carnavans have, is currently, there's a diplomat on it, so they're trying to improve its attitude so they can get, instead of minus, it's unhappy, which is a negative 0.5 on their economy versus being happy plus, which would be a plus 0.5. So that is giving them 2.5 EP instead of the normal 3. And of course, if they're good enough, they'll eventually get it to the point where it's going to be 3.5. What else do we have? At the top of their map, you'll notice that Home Fleet is sitting over this wormhole, especially after the rumblings of the Lyrans. The Lyrans have talked about how they want to stir the pot with the Carnavans and the Hydrans because of the dastardly alliance that they describe. So let's take a quick look. Home Fleet for the Carnavans is nothing to sneeze at. We've got 4 frigates, 2 destroyers, 2 drone bombardment destroyers, 2 YCAs, a drone bombardment cruiser, and a YCC. So nothing too crazy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 12 ships. So 12 ships total in this fleet, and a fair spread of total attack and defense factors. You'll note that, again, when it comes to the Carnavan ships, the total attack factors tend to be not as significant as, let's say, the Romulans with their ships, just because, for example, the YCC is a 3-7, better defense, not as great on the attack, as opposed to, for example, even the Hydran YCC, which is a 4-6. So interesting to note. And then, of course, as we as we go up into Hydran space and we start to look at the other green faction on the map, this is where things get so interesting from my perspective. And you tell me what you think. Look at this. Look at this spreading out of Carnavan ships into Hydran space. We've got, first of all, a Carnavan YBS fully completed its construction. You got a crippled YFF and crippled Orion ship. Curious what's going to happen with that crippled Orion ship. The captured Lyran WCA, so nothing too crazy there. But again, a YCA, a drone bombardment destroyer, a frigate, a destroyer, basically just some ships securing and protecting that YBS. And yet, they've also got this other one over here, convoy with 2 frigates. I'm wondering what they're doing with that. Are they going to build another base there, or are they going to build a base around here? It seems as though the Carnavans are building a supply network into Hydran space. But for what purpose? Like we talked about moments ago, what's your strategic objective here? Now, if it's just to be able to provide supply to forward operating fleets to stir the pot with the ISC, sure, fair enough. But I'm curious as to what's going on. We might be able to tell based on the pre-positioning of some of these ships. You've got a cruiser, a drone bombardment cruiser here, which is 2 hexes away. If the Carnavan have speed 5, then their Y-era convoy can move 2 hexes, which would allow it to move to here, giving it a little protection to be able to build out another base. Now, if the Carnavans have supply 4, then 1, 2, 3, 4, they would be able to connect that base with this one. And then, of course, that connects with this colony here. So it'll be interesting to see where they and how they spread out their base infrastructure, because it'll be informing us as to what their supply tech is and what they're able to leverage and move forward. Very interesting to see how this is going. And then, of course, after that ship, you've got another 3 hexes up here. You've got this YFF. Again, what's going on? Is that pre-positioned to protect it from something? Maybe this YCB is in the wrong spot. Maybe it should be down in one of these 29 hexes with the 3 hex difference. I'm not sure. It's all very strange. And then, of course, that all feeds up to this fleet right here, which is Fox Fleet 1. What is Fox Fleet 1? It is 12 ships that are currently operating as an expeditionary fleet. And we were just talking about this before the live stream, the difference between homeless ships and the expeditionary fleet. So if you want to know about homeless ships, go check out our supply video in the tutorial section. So you can go check that out. And I talk about homeless ships in that video. Expeditionary ships are different in that whereas homeless ships are provided supply or paid for basically by the host nation, which in this case would be the Hydrans, expeditionary ships are paid for by the owning nation, if you want to call it that. So in this case, the Carnavans. So the Carnavans are paying for these ships if they're an expeditionary fleet. That expeditionary fleet can't be any greater than 12 ships. How many ships do we have here? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 10 ships. Oh, but wait. 11, 12. All those other ships are within supply for the Carnavan supply grid. But if we look at that, you can see that this one and this one combined with what's in Fox Fleet gives us our 12 ships. So that makes sense. It's an Expeditionary Fleet, or the Expeditionary Fleet rules anyway are being used to be able to supply that. So that's the Carnavans. Again, big ball in economy, excuse me as my itchy nose, big ball in economy of the Carnies at 43. And they are spreading into Hydran space. Very interesting. Now, why is that? Because, as we talked about before, bridges and fronts are opening up along the border between the Hydrans and the ISC. So let's take a quick look at the Hydrans ever so quickly. And I'll move this over just a little bit so you can see. Take away the ships for a moment. And right here, right here, you will see that there is a new resource that's been discovered down here. A new resource over here and a new resource over in Lima 26. Let's bring that back. So new resources discovered for the Hydrans, and this is a big sort of thanks from me to Jim, the Hydran player. On their hex here, Whiskey 22, this is where they have the big YDK. This is the sort of the cork in the hole for the Hydrans, and this has been their point of support moving forward into Hydran space. They have a number of ships here. So we've got a YCC, 2 Vols, and a YDN, and Home Fleet. So Hydran Home Fleet is nothing to sneeze at. Wow. Now there's quite a bit here. I'm just going to move it around a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. So what we can see here is that there is a total of 10 Vols in this stack, plus 2 3-Vol counters. So you've got 16 total frigates in this fleet. And if we add the 2 Vols there, we've got a total of 18 Vols on that hex. In addition, you've got 9 plus the YCC that's here. There we go. Plus the YCC that's there. You've got 10 YCCs. Taking a lesson from the Remans, you've got 10 command cruisers with their maximum 4-6 firepower, and then the 18 Vols to soak up damage. Ooh, that's going to be a hard target. Plus, on top of that, you have not 1, not 2, but 3 YDNs in that fleet. So, long story short, that makes this hex a very hard target, not only because of the 3 DNs, the 10 YCCs, the 18 Vols, but it's also got a YDK, which gives it an EW advantage, and of course, in battlefield or in battle repair capabilities. And the base brings its firepower to the fight without being included in Fleetcap. So it's a hard target. Now, as we move our way down, what else do we see here? We see that Iridium, Nickel, and Second Fleet are also on the border here. So let's take a quick look at what those are for the Hydrans. Metal? Iridium. What was it? Iridium, nickel. Oh, you're going to be in the shiny fleets, aren't you? Again. No, not in the shiny fleets. Metal fleets. Oh, we already did metal fleets. Metal. Oh, sorry, there's nickel. Okay, so Iridium, nickel, and then second. So let's pull up Second Fleet real quick. Whoops. Hydran, Second Fleet. Okay. Let's move this over here. A little easier to see. All right, so in this hex, we have an exploration cruiser, or looks like destroyer, 2 Vols, and 2 more Vols, so 4 Vols and a YCC, plus the exploration cruiser. And also, it looks like there is a crippled Vol and a tug. So certainly not a big offensive firepower fleet or anything like that. But a small fleet that's been used to be able to open up, as we take away the ships, a hole in this fog of war wall. So what we've seen here now is that the combination of the Hydrans and the ISC have opened up 1, 2, 3 vectors of attack, or 3 bridges, if you will, into Hydran and back the other way into Hydran space. So very interesting. Now, the ISC isn't just going to sit there and take it without doing something. So they've got a fleet of not one, not two, but there we go, 5 frigates that showed up. Looks like they moved into that hex and sort of caused whatever ship was in there to back out. There was a quick, short battle, and one of these frigates was crippled. And we've also got Justice Fleet as we go into the ISC's fleets, named echelons. Let's put it over here just so it's a little bit, put it over here so it's a little bit easier to see. So Justice Fleet is right here. It has a YCL, a tug, 3 destroyers, and 2 frigates. Again, not a mammoth fleet, not going to move the needle in any way, but more than enough to be able to plug the hole against what the Hydrans have in this spot. However, as we were talking about before, Fox Fleet is also there, and they are about to move in and do something. Let's also note that there is Hydran 3rd Fleet, which is a crippled Vol, and Tungsten Fleet. So let's take a quick look at Tungsten. What do we got in Tungsten? Metal fleets. Tungsten is an exploration ship with a crippled Vol. So a couple crippled Vols, a non-crippled Vol, and an exploration ship. So the Hydrans don't really bring much to the fight. It's the Carnavans that bring their 10 ships to the conflict. And essentially, the ISC have enough here to be able to stop the tide, if you will, when it comes to the Hydrans coming through. Also with the fact that the Hydrans with supply 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, can't really get too far into ISC space without something drastic happening. So, interesting to note, very interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how this goes forward as things kind of evolve. So, the big pillar of strength for the ISC is certainly this hex right here, X-ray X-ray 20, which is mammoth. Again, let me just pull up the ISC named echelons. And for context, I think maybe the best way to think about it is that you've got all the different named echelons except for Justice basically on this hex. Truth Fleet is its own thing. So where's Truth Fleet? Truth Fleet is a CA, 3 DDs, 4 DDs. So a CA and a couple DDs, which is just off 1 hex above it. But the rest of what's here is essentially in that hex. So you've got CCs, you've got a boatload of CLs, you've got a DN, 2 DNs, again, lots of these YCLs. When we looked at the Fleetcap, we saw how much bigger and more potent the ISC fleets were. And what this is setting up is one of 2 things. Either A, our World War I trench warfare standoff, essentially, or one of these factions is going to make a move in some way to move the needle. And that balls to the walls, like throwing everything you've got into the fight, is going to be interesting to watch as we go forward. A couple of interesting notes as to sort of finish off the Hydran turn. An interesting thing happened as a random event to the Hydrans. They had a kind of labor strike. So there are, in this game, and here I will I'll bring us back here. So in this game, we have role-playing or sort of environmental factors that will occur. So external events, random events that will occur that will change the dynamic of what's going on in the game. In the case of the Klingons, by example, we had a resource that was exhausted. And it was a unfortunate incident that caused me no amount of frustration. But nonetheless, a resource was exhausted, and that affected our economy. The Hydrans had something very similar. Well, similar in the sense it was a random event and negative in nature, and they had effectively a labor strike, which increased the cost of all their repairs and builds and caused them to go into a significant deficit, way more than they had initially planned. So what does that mean? That significantly impacted the amount of ships that they could build, the amount of ships they could repair, and what they could put forward into the fight. Now, the ISC would never know that unless they just sort of like watch what's happening. But basically that sort of economic shock caused all sorts of pain and trouble for the Hydran player. And so that negatively impacted their ability to sort of move last turn and do what they wanted to do last turn. Now, they've since recovered and they're sort of back in the black, but a really significant thing that slowed them down. The ISC suffered something very similar earlier on in the campaign. And in order for them to get past, they basically needed to spend money to sort of free up the unionized work to be able to get what they needed done. So there was random events, environmental factors that have negatively impacted both sides here, the Hydrans and the ISC. So very, very interesting. Now, just before we jump into the ISC side of the house, I want to just quickly take a look at the chat. Let's see here. Lord Lawless, is there an FB page for New Worlds? Yes, there is. Actually, we are Facebook live streaming there. Of course, if you enjoy watching and sort of joining us here on this live stream, I would ask that you join us and participate in the chat here on YouTube. But yes, there is a New Worlds Facebook page, and I will put it in the comments as we get closer to the end of the show. Facebook page, Lord. Yep. Okay, George says, Tony, the Hydran Xenon fleet is a lot closer to that center point than the Carnavan. Totally agree. However, the Hydrans have their hands full at the moment. They don't necessarily have the flexibility to be able to randomly send a ship to the center. However, if the Hydrans want to stir the pot with the Juggernauts, go ahead, be my guest. Big slow target 37 versus 44 in peacetime is like a frigate a turn, right? Fair. It's like 3.5 EP. So yes, that can certainly sort of weigh the economies one way or the other as far as like building a frigate, depending on what you're building, or which faction you are. Your frigates can either cost 2 or 2.5. Or destroyer can be 2.5 or 3. It depends on the faction. I know Klingon ships tend to be cheaper. ISC tend to be more expensive, by example. But that comes across in the attack and defense factors of those different ships. They're a little bit better for the ISC, by example, than they are for some other factions, and so on and so forth. So we'll have to see. But you're right, 37 versus 44, there is a difference there. But again, not such a big difference in the delta, the difference on the strategic scale, so to speak. A big slow target. Whoa, yes, look at this. How much is a site worth? Is economic development primarily driven by exploration and capture or development of existing time? It looks like Daniel has jumped in on this. Yes, economic expansion primarily requires the discovery and capture of resources, as in new resources. Daniel also says the sites that look like dots are simple resource points generating 1 EP per turn. Planets generate income based on their population size. Now, I don't have it preloaded for today's live stream, but there is I have a little graphic that shows the different planets. So basically we have it like this. The economic scale, or spectrum, if you will, goes from resources all the way up to your capital planet. Resources are 1 EP, and those are different. Those don't provide any supply. They are just like basically like a mining operation. Then you have a colony. Colony also provides 1 EP. The difference between a colony and a resource is that a colony provides supply. It becomes a supply node, a supply point. Then you have a developing planet. Developing planet are the circles with a little dot in the center. Think of it like the colony is a half circle with a dot. The developing planet is a total circle with a dot. And so that provides you 2 EP. Then there is the minor planet, which is the circle without a dot. That provides you 3 EP. Then you have a medium planet, which is sort of the larger half circle with the smaller half circle underneath it. That is a medium planet that provides you 4 EP. And then you have a major planet, which is the big circle, and that provides you 5 EP. And then the last of those 3, or the 3 of that spectrum, is your capital system, which is a major planet, but it's unique to every faction, and it provides you a 10 EP. Now, these are all default numbers, which you then can influence by their attitude, with attitude adjustments of happy, plus, or friendly, or indifferent. Then there's unhappy and hostile, which is H negative. So the spectrum can provide you improvements in economy. H plus, by example, for a minor planet, which is the first sort of tier where it starts to have an impact, provides you a bonus of plus 5 EP. On the flip side, if it's hostile, it has a negative impact of minus 0.5 EP. And so that happens for medium planets and major planets as well as your capital system. But that's kind of how that flushes out, if that makes sense. Hopefully that helps. Big Slow Target. You let me know. Jim says, yes, that will be a no. I'm not onto prodding bears like the Juggernauts. But Jim is a two-front But Jim, a two-front war seems like such a good idea. Of course. Too funny. Okay, let's slide back into the map while I take a quick sip of that wonderful Juggernaut-sponsored brew. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive in to the ISC. Now, ironically, we're talking about the ISC, but we're going to be moving into the Romulans. Now, we talked about where the majority of the fleets are already for the ISC, which is the cork in the hole, as I'm calling it, which is this concentration of ships, X-Ray 20 on the border. You also have Justice Fleet, which is sort of dealing with this little intrusion over here. But seeing as we're talking about the war, let's roll into the Romulans, because there's nothing much else that's happening from the ISC side, although, Paul, if you're out there, you correct me if I'm wrong. For example, the ISC aren't exploring any new territory. There's nothing substantial on that front. The two things I will note is that wormhole right over here, if you can see my cursor moving, the ISC had transited or traveled through that wormhole. It shows up in Federation space, and they are able to transit wormholes without being crippled. So that's an important note for anybody and everybody to think about when it comes to where the ISC are on that tech. But other than that, no big developments. However, when it comes to the war, this is where things change. We have Columbia Fleet now within and operating in ISC space. I'm going to guess they are operating using the Expeditionary Fleet rules, because as we go to the Romulans and pull up Columbia Fleet, goodness gracious me, look at this. We've got eight KE2s, which are the frigates. They are a better frigate for the Romulans than the Klingons, for example. They have not one, not two, but four KD4s, excuse me. So 4 cruisers, 8 frigates, 12 ships total, meeting that expeditionary rule limit. And it would seem as though this fleet, not only being in supply, but is in a great position to cause a whole lot of pain and hassle for the Hydrans. If I'm the Romulans, I'm thinking this fleet would be great at popping some of these bases back here. It's just a matter of how are you going to employ them. So, yeah, there's a lot of options. The Columbia Fleet, by example, being in supply, three hex supply, by example, could move as far as Tango 22, this hex right here, or Uniform 22 right here. Excuse me. And from there, they could move and attack. Now, granted, when they would finish attacking, they'd be out of supply, but they could move and then attack a lot of these bases. So in Uniform 22, they could go 1, 2, 3, and move in such a way so that they would avoid reactionary movement from the Hydrans. They can move in such a way that they would be able to engage this base. If they wanted to, they could even try and draw out reaction from the Hydran fleet. Long story short, this little Columbia fleet is going to be a real pain in the butt, because the Hydrans are going to have to move ships to be able to deal with it. Now, that being said, same thing for the ISC with dealing with the Carnavan fleet coming up. But based on the dynamic of what's happening on this border, I think of Columbia Fleet in my humble opinion, as being more of a thorn in the Hydran side than that Carnavan fleet is for the ISC. But time will tell. So beyond that, we can see that the KT-4, which is that that tug, for the Remans, is building another base forward, basically creating the supply network, if they continue it down, to be able to allow Reman ships to operate without limitation in ISC space, essentially opening up that war, or that front even more so. Interesting thing to note here, the way the alliance rules are being employed in this game, you could theoretically have the ISC at peace and the Remans at war, even though they're in an alliance. The Remans would be at war, the ISC could be at peace, and if they were attacking the Hydrans in Hydran space beyond that border, the Hydrans would be at war status. Why is that important? Because that pushes the needle towards war exhaustion. Now, the Hydrans can do the same thing to the ISC with the Carnavans, being that the Hydrans could be at peace and the Carnavans could attack, and then the Carnavans would be in war status. Carnavans would be at war status and keeping the ISC at war status. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but it's an interesting play that both sides are doing to be able to drive that economic exhaustion piece. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. Again, I've never played a game, and I've played about 4 or 5 of these now, where economic exhaustion has kicked in any significant way. So it'll be very interesting to see how this evolves going forward. All right, let's look. So we got that base that's under construction there. Of course, we got the YDK here. And then what do we got? We got Triton and Acropolis Fleet. Let's, I'm assuming it's Acropolis. Yeah, Acropolis Fleet. Sounds very... not Deathstroke, Dark Side to me. DC Dark Side. Okay, so Acropolis right here, cruiser, couple of destroyers, 3 of them, and then a couple of 2 frigates. So nothing too crazy. Looks like there is another tug en route, maybe to provide another vector or angle of supply. Then there's Triton Fleet. Let's take a look at Triton. Triton Fleet is, let's see here, 3 frigates. So 3 frigates, 2 frigates. I mean, nothing too crazy, but the more sort of bodies downrange that they keep, or hulls downrange they keep putting, the more it's going to be a problem for the Hydrans, especially since in this relationship, it would seem as though, the route of supply is shorter for the Remans, that they're building out their infrastructure so they can put more ships downrange, and they're doing that more than the Carnavan seem to be doing for the Hydrans. So it'll be interesting to see how this mix occurs and how they're going to sort of walk this forward. Let's keep going. I'm going to move my head to the other side here real quick, and let's take a look at what's going on up here. A couple notes. You will see as I take away the ships, there's this little bubble that's popped up here. This is a Paravian, the bird guys. Same faction as V that I decimated. So they've got a colony that's shown up here, and I would imagine the Remans are just going to stomp that real quick and add that to their economic powerhouse. But they discovered that with their exploration cruiser. Boom, right there. And we've got a coalition of fleets up here. They have effectively, the Remans that is, have effectively scared off the Juggernauts for the time being. And what do we have? We got Cerberus Fleet. Let's take a look. Cerberus. Oh, goodness. So Cerberus Fleet has a couple cripples. This is the 5 cruisers and 1 frigate that is crippled. And then we've got Prometheus and New Fleet. Prometheus is fully able and capable. And then New Fleet. Whoops. New Fleet is, that's a boatload of cripples. So you can see that there is quite a collection of ships on the border here with the Lyrans, but a lot of them are crippled, and I guess they're going to slowly go through their process of being repaired. The YDK here in a great position to be able to repair those as quickly as possible. And then, of course, you've got quite a collection of ships along this border, as it would seem between this KD-3E, these 2 exploration cruisers, 1 here and 1 here on the border, these 2 are going to flush out this fog of war. And if I'm the Lyrans, I got to say I would be watching out for what's going to happen along this border. Although maybe they've already had those discussions and they've chilled each other out. Speaking of the Lyrans, let's take a look at Big Yellow, my Juicy Fruit faction. For those of you who I don't know, it was Juicy Fruit and Spearmint. Those are the gums from the 80s. I remember. So Juicy Fruit, what's going to move you here? It looks as though the Lyrans are in the short strokes of finishing out their exploration in and around this area. Speaking of which, this draws my attention to something that's one of the things in our game is we have this tech tree, and I keep meaning to finish and get out that tech tree video. I apologize. So with the tech tree, one of the technologies that we have is logistics. And as part of the logistics technology, there's a limitation on how many extended supply missions can be run by a tug or a convoy or so on. And so the initial is 1, and then as you work your way through the timeline and you sort of invest money in this research or you just kind of make your way along, you'll uncover and open up more logistical capability. Up until now, we've had a little bit of a blinder on with regards to that tech. And so the GM notified all of us through our Discord channel that while he had not been enforcing that, he will be enforcing it going forward. So FYI. So I mention that because the Lyrans, in my mind, have been taking advantage, if we take away the ships, of extended supply a lot in their empire. You can see based on the distribution of their bases, it's sort of a hodgepodge, less structured. For example, when we look at the Federation, it's very structured. When you look at the Lyrans, it's less structured. And so when you look at that, it's, they've just been making use of extended supply. So we can see that here, and they're using that as we go south. So something to be mindful of as we go forward. And just check that out. So we've got Blood Claw, Hidden Dagger, Enemy Blood, these fleets that exist. Let's take a quick look. Lyran. Enemy Blood. Goodness. I have not spent a lot of time looking. Enemy Blood fleet. There we go. Okay, so let's put that over here. So you can see this is a Y-era fleet with not 1 but 2 CAs and a CLDD and a YFF. That's sort of providing a little bit of security down here for the exploration that's occurring. You can see there's a tug and an exploration cruiser along with some small exploration freighters, really pushing that angle down to the bottom of the map. In addition, we've got a Blood Claw and Hidden Dagger. Let's see. Blood Claw. Goodness. Oh my goodness. Finding these fleets sometimes is so Hidden Dagger. There we go. Hidden Dagger fleet. Okay, so Hidden Dagger is a YDN, a YCA 3. It looks like 3. Yep. 3 DDs and 3 FFs. So not a significant crazy fleet, but something I think that's there. Oh. Okay. Hold on. So something that looks unusual. I just am noticing this now. The color scheme threw me off. This is a CW, and I don't know off the top of my head what that is. It makes me think it's a war cruiser. It's a Lyran, and it's a straight 7 ship. It looks like something out of the M or GW era. It's an unknown vessel. So this is a random event, but I'm really curious, Daniel, our GM, what this is all about. I'm sure the Lyrans will have to figure it out and tell us, but I'm really curious what's going on here. Are these Lyrans from the future visiting to say, hey, watch out for this thing, or go stomp those Carnavans, or deal with the Remans, or maybe you want to start a fight with the Federation, or don't do any of those things? We shall see. Very interesting. I'm just noticing it now. Look at me. Okay. Lastly, Blood Claw. Let's do a quick little Blood Claw. I'm trying to find it. I'm so sorry. It's taking me so long to find these fleets. Blood Star. No. Red Claw. What? Black Claw? Blood Star? Where is Blood Claw Fleet? Enemy Blood Fleet? Oh, there it is. Goodness gracious. Okay, so Blood Claw. A YCC, a YCL. Looks like these are the remnants of the attack and taking over of this planet at the very north. And then they're working their way back. So that's looking good. The Lyrans, as we looked at Fleetcap, we saw that the Lyrans have a fleet size similar or comparable to the Klingons. So they're no slouch. They just happen to be sort of nestled right beside the biggest fleet in the game, and of course the Federation. And although the Federation is smaller in fleet size currently than the Lyrans, they do have a good spread of ships, shall we say. So very interesting to note. Let me roll into La Fédération. Two big things of note here. We noted before the discovery of these Kzinti factions. If I take away the ships, and I'll take away the units real soon. So you can see that there is a minor planet here, and this is an example of the developing planet. Sorry, the medium planet, excuse me. So minor planet with the circle, medium planet with the big circle on top, and the little circle on the bottom. That is a medium planet. So 4 EP and 3 EP respectively that the Federation, if all things go well, can incorporate into their faction. So that's good. Also, we've got an amoeba, a space monster that's shown up on the border. And as we toggle the ships real quick, you'll see that there is discovery of a resource here on the edge of their space as they continue to push towards the center. And of course, they are continuing with their tugs and various things, trying to explore and get to a point where they can discover and build out a base, I'm going to guess, on this wormhole. That's the wormhole right here where the ISC came through. So very interesting to see sort of the areas of focus for the Federation. We can also take note that the 7th Fleet, which was that fleet that I encountered when the Klingon ship went through that wormhole, 7th Fleet continues to be 5 frigates and a YCA, so that's good. And then, of course, they have surrounding cruisers with prime teams continuing their various exploration. Nothing too crazy on the Federation front. Steady and true. They are maintaining, and as they go forward. The big red Tholians. So I'm kind of curious as to what sort of moved the needle for them when it came to their economies. The biggest thing I can see is that reformed Methantis, or the Hydrans here. So this was a 1 EP resource for them, being that it is a minor planet and it has unhappy. So being unhappy, it is 2.5 EP best case scenario versus the 3 if it was neutral or unfriendly. So right now, I think what's happened is that it went from being devastated to fully sort of functional, and it went from 1 EP to 2.5. So that 1.5 EP bump brought them from what they were before to 44. And so we can see that that's going to happen shortly for the Gorn planet that they decimated up here. That'll be happening soon for them. And then, of course, whenever they decide to eventually incorporate this ISC planet, that'll be another 3 EP bump. So there'll be a 1 EP bump from the Gorn planet at the top, because this is a developing planet, or a 2 EP resource. When it's devastated or crippled, it's only a 1. So it'll go from 1 to 2, meaning 44 to 45. And then if they're able to get this planet on side, that'll be another 3 EP bump. So before there was a question asked about 3 EPs like a frigate, you're going to see in very short order the Tholians go from being 44 to 48. They're going to be getting close and pushing the 50 mark. They, as an economy, are dangerous. They are starting to separate themselves from the pack. Granted, they were very much middle of the road for a long time, and everybody else can discover more resources and sort of move their way along as well. But be mindful of that. Watch out for that. The Tholians are coming. So with that said, we can still see that the Kzinti faction here is unfriendly. I want them to be hostile. Come on, somebody help me with making these guys hostile and starting a conflict with the Tholians. I want to see the Tholians struggle with these guys, or maybe a random event or something to cause a little bit of conflict, because the Tholians, again, just struggle when it comes to building out a substantive offensive firepower. As we scroll down, we already talked about the Gorn, relatively speaking. No big changes with the Gorn. They are continuing their exploration piece. They are in discussions with, or have negotiated with, the Tholians, and they will be starting trade. My understanding is, anyway, that they will be starting trade shortly. We can see that the Gorn are continuing to build out their base network along the border. Very smart and important to do. And again, got to push this exploration piece up to the northeast. This backyard faction, again, important to explore and find and discover more resources, but really important to continue the exploration. As was discussed earlier, exploration is really how economies grow. And then when exploration's done, conquering other people's resources, just putting it out there. I mean, after all, it is a war game. So the Gorn are doing that piece there. All right. I'm going to move my head one more time to the other side. And now we see the Romulans. Now, I got to admit, I'm a big fan, intimidatedly so, a big fan of the Romulans right now. Look at this. Look at this. This unbelievable bulge of exploration. They are pushing the boundaries. I love it. So look at this big push, and they're building out bases to be able to support their exploration. I'm assuming they have at least supply 3, possibly 4, and they're going to be pushing this exploration piece. I think if I'm the Romulans, I'm trying to push the exploration to the center, obviously as fast as possible. But from the Romulan side, I have a feeling they're looking to close off the Gorn. I mean, I'm sure they'll just take advantage however it turns out, but they are pushing towards blocking off the Gorn. So we'll see how that works out. But I got to admit, I'm loving what the Romulans are doing. I mean, yes, they're my neighbor, and maybe I should be threatened. I don't know, but I'm loving what I'm seeing. I love the fact that they're pushing exploration and they're driving that piece forward. Yes, they're like one of the lowest economies in the game, but if they keep up this strategy, that will change. Like, the numbers will push that in the opposite direction. You can see that on the bottom here, a couple of interesting things. One, again, they are just continuing the exploration piece, which is awesome. 8th Legion has discovered a new wormhole. 2 things. One, that's awesome. They can figure out what's on the other side. But the Romulans have explicitly, in the role-playing aspect of the game, they have come out against wormhole travel. They believe it to be a existential threat with regards to the Juggernauts, and they want to prevent other people from exploring or going through wormholes, because effectively it's stirring the pot and causing chaos when it comes to the Juggernaut faction, the AI-driven GW-era ships that overpower everybody else. And I imagine they do not want to have, understandably so at this point, they don't want to have a Juggernaut faction pop into their space, because it would be very difficult for them to stop a Juggernaut faction at this point, based on their distribution of ships. Now, granted, they're not the weakest faction in the game, and certainly if the Gorn can pull it off, the Romulans can too. However, I'm just saying, it's a huge pain in the butt when the Juggernauts show up. And so they, from a role-playing aspect, have come out against it, and they are lobbying other governments, other players, to not explore, travel through wormholes and do that. So we'll see how that evolves going forward. But long story short, really excited about what's going on with the exploration and the expansion of the Romulan borders. One little note here as we move into the Klingon space, the R&D team that's here, the Klingons are moving their R&D team, which was previously on this wormhole here. We were going to use that for wormhole tech, but after negotiating and discussing and coming up with an agreement with the Romulans, we're going to exchange R&D teams and drive that research and development collectively and work together. Despite our bumpy start at the sort of the early stages of the game, we are mapping our cooperation going forward. It's going to be good. Speaking of the Klingons, let's begin with our exploration, our 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, seek out new life and civilizations, to boldly conquer and dominate those civilizations as we encounter them. Well, as you can see, there's a bit of a flutter on the border here. These ships were all ships that were part of these fleets that were already there, so it's not like these ships just appeared out of nowhere. These ships were in these 2 fleet boxes and have now gone out to try and explore these hexes. Just like we've seen with the Federation and other factions, cruisers or bigger sized ships have a better chance of exploring unexplored space. Not a great chance, especially the Y-Tech, but they have a better than nothing chance. So what I've done here is I'm taking these cruisers and I'm dispersing them into the Fog of War hexes in an effort to try and uncover the Fog of War. Excuse me. Now I've got the Y era or small exploration ships and an exploration cruiser also in the same area. So I will continue this sort of operation to try and unfog these hexes. But the idea basically here is to wipe out this series of Fog of War hexes, which, let me take away the ship so you can see the Fog of War that's there. So those fogged hexes, I want to take them out, open that up, and allow for a good exchange back and forth between the Romulans and the Klingons. I got to say, the relationship between the Klingons and the Romulans, looking good. I like it. Other than that, we can see that there is exploration continuing in the northern sections. Despite the fact that we lost that resource on the border, we discovered a new resource here. So one lost, one gained. And then, of course, one of our resources got tapped out. And we're continuing to explore sort of into this area of space here. The goal is, of course, to push into the Charlie line and go north to be able to, get towards the center of the map. We'll see how that works out, but that's the sort of overall objective: push towards the center of the map and figure out what is or is not there. And then lastly, there were some crippled ships that were operating in and around this area here, which you can see here. These are crippled E2s, so they're just moving out. Moving to different locations where I can make them sort of more available and responsive once they're repaired, that is, to be able to respond to sort of any issues that go on. Also, in my mind, E2s or like these frigates are very non-threatening, not only because they have very low command factors, so they can't control a lot of ships. They can't sort of launch a fleet against you, but they're good for defense. So, for example, these E2s, my intention is to put them in this area here with the YBS, and sort of like protect this planet here, and so on and so forth. Because making sure that there's enough military force in the area to prevent bad things from happening, always important. And if there's one thing that the Klingon war experience has taught us, pre-positioning ships is important, especially when you have neighbors that tend to jump over the border. Not that we know who those people are. Nonetheless, wayward ships found in the wrong side of the neutral zone can be escorted back to the right side if you have ships in the area. If not, well, you can't do it. So that's what's going on there. As was mentioned by Eugene, yes, this E1 was repaired by the Federation. Thank you, Federation friends, and has come through the other side. So that ship is going to get repaired, and great things have happened. That we've gone back and forth through that wormhole, and we've been able to sort of start research and development on that tech, if only to be able to protect ourselves, Klingons that is, from other factions wanting to transit and travel wormholes, and then, of course, eventually be able to provide supply through those wormholes and attack us through that vector. Not that I'm expecting the Federation to do that with us, but, you just got to protect yourself in these kinds of situations. So with that said, that is the round robin. We've done the turn 61 reveal. We've gone from the Carnies all the way around counterclockwise to the Klingons. We've shown the exploration of new worlds and civilizations, the exploration and exploitation of resources. We've discussed the benefits and the cons, the negatives of conflict. What are your thoughts on that? Is it worthwhile getting into these wars if your economy is suffering so much? We've seen the development of some interesting new sort of directions that the game is taking. Of course, bogging down in the war between the four powers now, the continued exploration of the Lyrans and the discovery of that new mysterious ship, which I noticed Daniel made a comment on. I'll have to jump in there in a second. The Federation continuing their slow and steady pace towards the center. The Tholians, the ever omniscient economic threat that I keep saying that they are slowly getting to the point where I tell you they're going to be the first to hit 50. Watch out. And then, of course, the Romulans with their vast fleets of exploratory fleets that are pushing the boundaries of their borders. Really interesting to see how the Romulans, the early part of this game was dominated by the factions of the East, if you'll say. The Hydrans, the Carnavans, the Klingons, being conflict-oriented, right? Starting and stirring up things. The Hydrans conquering a bunch of these planets. Obviously, the Klingons, the Carnavans getting in on it, and the war with the Romulans. Now, what we're seeing is the rise of the West. We're seeing the Tholians as an economic power coming to the fore. We're seeing the Federation, slow and steady, becoming this sort of over-the-horizon threat that I can definitely see them becoming. The expansion of Romulan borders in a way that no one else is able to match. It's very interesting to see how this is rolling forward and what's going to happen. There is a careful balance that is occurring between economic and military power. We've seen the Remans, as an example, be the pinnacle, still are, of military power in this game. However, they are falling behind economically. We have seen the Hydrans, who were once one of the strongest economies, suffering. Now they're more middle of the road, but they are facing a headwind of military strength as the dynamic between their ships and the ISC is changing. Will that change as they go forward? I don't know. Again, the exploration of these boundaries, the borders, and the finding of more resources, and the constant, steady drive towards the center of the map. We'll see how this all sort of changes things. I mentioned in the last live stream how this was the phase 2 of the game, and I really do believe that we're about to enter a new phase. Not only do we have different factions rising in relative power to their neighbors, but you're going to see a legacy of military strength from certain factions and a rise of new power as certain factions either bring new technologies online. We're getting to a point where if you had been investing in M-Tech research from the very beginning, it's not going to be too long before we start seeing a couple of M-chips pop up. You're going to see various factions like the Tholians, who are economically so strong, or the potential to be so strong, and the Federation too. Once they sort of hit their stride, watch out. How is this going to really change the dynamic of the game? Are you going to see the Feds flex or the Tholians flex? Who's going to suffer as a consequence? Is it the Lyrans and the Gorn? Or maybe if they hit the center, are they going to focus that military and economic strength against the juggernauts? And if they do, to what effect? What are the riches that are at the center of the universe? At the very start of the game, there was a suggestion that there was great wealth at the center of the galaxy. That's really the motivating factor for why so many players are driving towards the center. The curiosity, the anticipation, the fear of missing out of those big resources. Who's going to be the first to find out? Who's going to be the first to discover them, to conquer them, to exploit them? And how is that going to change the dynamic of the game? The high ground, Obi-Wan is this great series that's going to be coming out soon. And there's been all these memes about I have the high ground, of course, from the prequels. And the center of this map will effectively be the high ground, as though whoever controls that space will have access to everybody else. So how is that going to play out, and how is that going to map out? We shall see. My nose is incredibly itchy. I do apologize. I'm going to take a quick sip and dive into the chitter chatter here. Oh, goodness, my nose is itchy. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, I'm going to scroll back up here. Oh, my goodness. Okay, Chuck is actually saying 3-front war. True, fair enough. George, I was speculating. By the time that lone carny can make it to the center, it would have already conquered. Maybe the center would have already been conquered by somebody else. Perhaps. Eugene, did the wormhole that the Juggy used go away, or was it a wormhole with the R? Okay, so Eugene, here's the deal with the Juggernaut wormholes. Think of it like Babylon 5. In Babylon 5, there were ships that had the ability to generate these wormholes, artificial wormholes, like space gates, and they pop into space and they pop out. That's essentially what the Juggernauts are able to do. They create artificial gravity wells or wormholes that they pop through, stir up trouble, and then pop back out. So that's essentially what they're doing. Daniel, it is indeed a CW, something that shouldn't exist yet. This is the Lyran ship the mysterious ship that's shown up in Lyran space. Wonder what's going on. Is it a visitor from the future? Are they going to share dastardly secrets with the Lyrans? Are the Lyrans going to have a tech jump? That could be interesting. Chuck says Vandal incident. Now, Vandal, is that Vandal as in vandalism, or is it, what's the name of that character? Vandal something from the DC universe, not DCEU, but the DC universe, who lives forever, has advanced technologies, and brings it to the forefront. We shall see. Shenanigans incident, Bill says. Okay. Anna Randy, really? Anna Randy, really? I so apologize as I'm screwing up that name. Can you phonetically work it out for me? I'm having trouble. Anna Rady? Anna Rady, really? I'm just going to call you Anna for now. Looks like it's time to invade the Romulans. Ooh, yes. Okay. Who's going to invade the Romulans? Are you talking about the Klingons invading the Romulans? We're not going to do that just yet. I'm enjoying the peace between the Romulans and I think there's a lot of potential to do good things. So I'm just going to, I'll tamp down that expectation. Besides, if you just want to look at it from a purely, like we talked about, going to war for an objective, when you look at the border with the Romulans, there's nothing really on the other side of that border. Like, there's no big resources or strategic gain. Like, there's no reason to do that at this point. So there's no win to go to war with the Romulans at this point. There's other wins elsewhere in the map, especially when it comes to exploration, that give you a better sort of reward on that investment. So just a thought. Eugene, in prior games, the Klingons had to have a minimum number of prison ships with special abilities. Is that a factor in this game? So yes and no. We talked about that early in the game with regards to the requirement for prison ships. And there was a rule around it, and then it just kind of fell by the wayside in the sense that, like, it didn't represent what was going on in the game. Certainly the GM and I can have a future discussion about it, but basically prison ships kind of lost their requirement. But we could reintroduce it if need be. Not a big deal one way or the other, but yeah. Long story short, prison ships aren't a big thing in this iteration of the game. Daniel, IKV Vandal, an X ship that traveled back in time. Oh, the Imperial Klingon vessel Vandal. I don't know the Vandal. I'll have to find out more about it. No, an SFB Vandal. Okay. So both Daniel and Chuck are talking about this incident in SFB. Bill, the Klingon X-ship Vandal that got sent back in time in reference to the Lyran CW. Okay, everyone seems to know about this, and I don't. Thank you. Jim, again, the Klingon F5X, I think, same thing happened in Hydran space with the Lancer X saving the old colonies from conquest in the Y era. Anna says, Anna Radarel? That was a random comment prompted by seeing your nice line of cruisers. Yes, well, of course. I mean, who wouldn't get excited when you see a big line of D-era or like D cruisers on the border? I mean, I would get alarmed if I saw them out of nowhere. But like I say, those ships were there before. They were just in the fleet boxes, and then they came out to basically try and eliminate the fog of war hexes. So let's not get too excited. Let's settle down. Okay, so Anarad. Okay, Anarad from now on. Anarad. Jim, big smiley face. Ducks on the wall at the fairground. Ducks. My goodness. Well, you know, if somebody wants to take a shot at the Klingon Empire, I mean, I think I've proven, or at least the Klingons have proven in this game, that they are not a wallflower to be trifled with. So, if you want to start a fight, I don't see the Romulans doing that because A, we're getting along great and it's working out well. And at this point, I just don't see that happening anytime soon. We'll see. But, you know, would that be the glass jaw Vols? Vil says, yeah. I mean, we'll see. You know, one fight at a time. I mean, we'll let Jim deal with his ISC/Riemann problem first, and then we'll let him comment on other folks. Pew pew. All right, everybody. So, blood must flow. Anarad says, well. Indeed it must. And speaking of all things flowing, coffee being one of them. Thank you again to the Juggernaut donation today. The AI is keeping me caffeinated. Thank you so much. It's been a great but short episode so far today, about an hour and a half. Talking about the happenings of what's going on. We talked about the economies and the sort of stratification that's going on, the high rollers, the big spenders, and watch out, those Tholians will be those big spenders if you're not too careful. The Federation is the money maker on the horizon, so watch out for them. And, you know, how is that going to evolve going forward? Again, the question for you, if you're catching this on the replay, put it in the comments. What do you want to see from these players as they engage in these wars? Are they objective-based or milestone-based? Are they trying to accomplish something in their wars? And do you want to see that communicated in some way, shape, or form? I know as the Klingons, next time our war, whenever that happens, there's a role-playing aspect that's happening in the background that I've alluded to. And as it evolves, it will inform how things are going to happen. So it'll be interesting to sort of see how that does or does not impact our various conflicts from the Klingon side. But whenever that next conflict happens, and of course it's a war game, so there's going to be some conflict. Whenever that next conflict happens, I'll be sure to let you know what my military objectives are. We'll see. But yeah, do you want to see that? Do you want to see that communicated? Do you want to understand what it is the Klingons, the Carnavans, the Romulans, the ISC, the Riemans, or the Tholians are trying to accomplish? And then you can measure how successful they're being. You let me know. And of course, next week on Saturday at 11 o'clock, you can join us live here for our 62, hopefully, turn reveal, barring any kind of crazy complications. Of course, if you want to know about that, then you got to hit that subscribe button, get the notifications, and know that that this will be something that will be ready for you at 11 o'clock Pacific time on Saturday morning. So if you've enjoyed it, thank you so much. I can see that we've got double digit on the likes. Thank you so much. We've hit a peak of, it seems, 13 concurrent viewers over the course of this live stream. So thank you very much for everybody for the lucky number 13, currently at 12. I appreciate you all. Thank you for being part of this community. If and when we get to the big 2-0, so excited. Again, one big thank you to Lex Chaotica for being number 230 on our subscriber list and helping us get towards number 500 to be able to unlock the feature of the community tab within YouTube. Really looking forward to eventually getting there. We're almost at the 50% mark at 250. And then once we get past that, then we can, again, get towards 500. Can we do it before the end of summer? I hope so. I pray. It'd be nice. It'd be good. You know, something to tick off on the bucket list here for this channel. And lastly, before I go, I want to ask all of you, what else do you want to see in these live streams? Of course, we're doing the discussion about the money. We're talking about the evolving game, the map, and so on. But what else do you want to hear about? Let me know in the comments. Especially in the comments after the videos kind of go up. Let me know what it is that you want to see in these episodes so that we can scratch that itch, feed your need, and provide you the satisfaction that you so richly deserve. For coming out and appreciating and thanking and supporting us, thank you so much for all your support and, of course, joining us here on a Saturday morning. I won't take any more of your time, but I will say thank you very much and let you know that I very much appreciate you guys. So thank you very much for being with us here on Saturday morning. I will see you next week. Bye for now.